For most of human history, there were no roads, no maps, no compass, no ships with sails powerful enough to cross an ocean. And yet, somehow, humans ended up everywhere, from the frozen tip of Siberia to the deserts of Australia to the furthest islands in the Pacific. This is the story of how they did it, one impossible journey at a time. It started in Africa, over 100,000 years ago. Small groups of early humans began walking, not because they had a destination in mind, but because survival demanded movement. When food ran out, when the climate shifted, when a rival group moved in, the answer was always the same: keep walking. These early migrations weren't planned expeditions. They were slow, generational drifts. A group might move only a few kilometers in an entire lifetime, following herds of animals, rivers, and coastlines. But over thousands of years, those small steps added up to thousands of miles. The first great barrier humans had to cross wasn't an ocean. It was the Arabian Peninsula, a brutal stretch of desert separating Africa from the rest of the world. Some researchers believe early humans crossed during rare wet periods, when the desert briefly bloomed with grasslands and rivers, creating temporary corridors through the sand. Miss that narrow window, and the desert would have been an impassable wall. Once out of Africa, humans followed the coastlines. Coastal travel wasn't just easier, it was smarter. Coastlines offered a constant, predictable food source: shellfish, fish, and stranded sea life that didn't require hunting skill or coordinated group tactics. A single person could survive off a beach in a way they couldn't survive off an open plain. So humans spread along the edges of continents like a slow-moving tide, island hopping and rounding peninsulas long before they ever ventured inland. This coastal route is believed to be how humans reached South Asia, then Southeast Asia, and eventually the edge of one of the most extreme journeys in ancient history: the crossing into Australia. At the time, sea levels were lower, and many islands that are separated today were connected or nearly touching. But even then, reaching Australia required crossing open water. Real open water, with no visible land on the other side. This means that at some point, ancient humans built rafts or basic boats and deliberately paddled into the unknown, with absolutely no guarantee that land existed on the other side. Think about that for a moment. They saw water in front of them, no land in sight, and they went anyway. That single decision, repeated by different groups over thousands of years, is one of the boldest gambles in human history. Once in Australia, humans adapted to some of the harshest and most unique environments on Earth: deserts, tropical rainforests, and everything in between, becoming isolated from the rest of humanity for tens of thousands of years. Meanwhile, other groups pushed north and east, following the coast of Asia. Eventually, they reached a point where Asia and North America were connected by a strip of land now called Beringia, what we know today as the Bering Land Bridge. During the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked into glaciers that sea levels dropped dramatically, exposing a wide stretch of land between Siberia and Alaska. This wasn't a narrow, temporary bridge. It was an entire landmass, sometimes hundreds of miles wide, with its own grasslands, animals, and ecosystems. People didn't rush across it. Some lived on it for generations before ever continuing east. When they finally moved into North America, an entire, untouched continent opened up in front of them. From there, human migration exploded outward at a pace that's almost hard to believe. Within a few thousand years, humans had traveled from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of South America, a distance of over 9,000 miles, through nearly every climate on Earth: Arctic tundra, dense forests, deserts, mountain ranges, and tropical jungles. They didn't have horses. They didn't have wheels suited for rough terrain. They walked, generation after generation, following rivers, mountain passes, and food sources until they had settled 2 entire continents. But the most mind-bending feat of ancient human travel wasn't a walk. It was across open ocean, the settlement of the Pacific Islands. Long after most of the world had already been reached by land, a group of skilled seafarers began doing something almost no other ancient culture attempted: sailing directly into open ocean, intentionally, without knowing what was on the other side. These voyagers didn't have compasses or written maps. Instead, they read the ocean itself like a language. They tracked the direction of swells beneath their canoes, since ocean swells travel in consistent patterns that bend and shift around islands, revealing land long before it's visible. They followed the flight paths of certain birds that always return to land at night. They memorized the position of stars as they rose and set at specific points on the horizon, essentially building a mental star compass passed down through generations. Using nothing but these observational skills, they sailed thousands of miles across the open Pacific in double-hulled canoes, discovering and settling islands separated by enormous stretches of empty ocean. Hawaii, Tahiti, New Zealand, and eventually Easter Island, one of the most isolated inhabited places on the planet. To put that in perspective, some of these voyages covered distances similar to sailing from New York to London in a canoe, using only the stars and the shape of the waves to know where to go. Back on land, other ancient civilizations were solving the travel problem in different ways. Traders crossing the deserts of the Middle East and Central Asia relied on camels, animals uniquely built for crossing environments that would kill most other creatures. Capable of surviving without water for over a week and traveling for days through sandstorms that could bury a person alive. These desert trade routes eventually connected into what we now call the Silk Road, a sprawling network of paths stretching from China to the Mediterranean. But it's important to understand, no single trader walked the entire Silk Road. Goods, ideas, and even diseases moved across it in stages, passed from one regional trader to the next, city to city, like a slow relay race that spanned an entire continent. In colder northern regions, other groups developed their own solutions. Sleds pulled by dogs allowed people to cross frozen tundra at speeds no human on foot could match, opening up trade and travel across the Arctic long before wheels were of any use in that terrain. What's remarkable, looking back at all of this, is that every one of these journeys was made blind. No ancient traveler crossing into Australia knew land existed on the other side of that water. No Pacific voyager had a map of the islands they were about to discover. No group crossing Beringia knew an entire continent was waiting for them. They moved forward anyway, using nothing but the stars, the waves, the wind, the animals around them, and an almost unexplainable human drive to see what was over the next horizon. By the time recorded history begins, humans had already reached nearly every corner of the habitable world, without engines, without maps, and often without any real certainty that they'd survive the journey at all. That's the story of how ancient humans traveled the world. Not with technology, not with certainty, with observation, patience, and the willingness to sail, walk, or paddle straight into the unknown.